Hey, good evening. This is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is Monday, June 26th. It is 7:02 p.m. And the first case we have tonight is a remand hearing from the Housing Appeals Committee. And this is for 9 and 15 Pinnacle Drive, map number 19, parcels 182, 183. This is a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, Sections 20 through 23, as amended, to allow construction of 28 townhomes, non-age restricted condominium townhouses. So this was, just to bring everybody up to date, this was a case that had been opened by the zoning board probably about a year ago, and it wasn't a full year ago, it would have been, but it was in 2022. And the town claimed safe harbor because we had met our housing production goals for affordable housing because of the approval of the large development in South Walpole, which was a 40B development. And we had a letter from the state saying that we were in safe harbor, as it's termed. After we claimed safe harbor, the applicant appealed to the Housing Appeals Committee. And one of the things the Housing Appeals Committee said was that because the developer in South Walpole had not drawn the building permits, after 1 year, we were no longer in safe harbor. So that is why we are back here. The 40B process normally has 180 days for the zoning board to render a decision. The clock had stopped once we filed saying that we were in safe harbor and the appeals process took place. So what we're looking at on this one is we'd expect in November of this year that we'll have to have a decision for the development on Pinnacle Drive, either an approval with conditions, or a denial. That's the route that the board could go. So, that being said, what we're going to do tonight is, this is really almost a reintroduction for everybody, and the applicant is going to explain what is being proposed and bring us all up to date on where they are at with this project. Okay, Mr. Petrozzi, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've stated, this is an application that was filed quite a bit of time ago, and we're here back to reintroduce the project to the board and seek a comprehensive permit. Just to refresh the board's records, Wall Street received a site approval letter for 40 units to be built on this property. And during the course of the evaluation of the property and our desire to make it fit into the neighborhood, we proposed the townhouse development, but the number of units was reduced from 40 to 28. And since that time, we've also decided to eliminate parcel 182 from the permit and construct a single-family home on that particular lot, which is in the process of happening in the next few weeks. So tonight, there are still a number of issues to be resolved relative to the parcel. The parcel is located along Bird Pond, as you probably know. Historically, Bird Pond is part of what has been determined to be the Neponset River, which has a 200-foot riverfront area associated with it. Wall Street has received an exemption from the Mass DEP due to the property being part of the historic mill complex of Bird Corporation for many years. And they've determined that the property is exempt from the riverfront regulations and only subject to the Wetlands Protection Act that we will be filing a notice of intent with shortly. That superseding determination is under appeal by the town of Walpole, and no decision has been rendered relative to the town's appeal. We're pretty confident that the town's appeal will not prevail, but still, what will then happen is that there, not to get too deep into the weeds on wetlands protection, but there's another category that this property falls under, which is degraded, previously developed riverfront area, in which case the project may get revised to a single building with 40 units back as a substitute plan, which at this point, we'd like to proceed with the 28 units, or now it's 26. And if and when that appeal comes down, one way or the other, we'll either have to revise our plans and go back to the 40 units within the area that's been determined to be previously developed. So I have with me tonight John Glosser, who will go through the details of the site and discuss any questions that the board may have. That's pretty much it.
Got a couple of questions for you right
Sure.
off the start. So the change in site parcels, one of them, you said single-family home is going to be going up
Yeah,
on it.
the,
How does that change things with Mass, your letter of eligibility, because that was based on the two parcels?
I think there's a letter in the file that, relative to the change from the 28 to the 40, which they determined to be, not require a new site approval letter to be issued. So.
Right, the decrease from 40 to 28, I get that. But what about the fact that the parcel, there's less land involved?
Well, there's less units too, so it's, we've decreased the number of units from 28 to 26. And there may be some wiggle room to go, as you know, they should be in increments of 4, so it could end up being a 24-unit project at some point. But we'd like to go through the process, get comments from neighbors, board, peer review, whoever, and then decide which avenue we're going to pursue. But I think, from our perspective, constructing a single-family home on that particular lot, which fronts on Pinnacle Drive, is more receptive to the neighborhood and more consistent with what's already there on the street line. So I don't believe that Mass Housing would have a problem with us eliminating that parcel from the project.
Okay, but do you have a letter saying that it's,
If you need a letter, we'll get a letter if you want a letter, but I don't.
well, I mean, your letter of eligibility was based on two parcels for 40 units. I've seen the letter that says you can go down to 28,
Okay.
but I haven't seen any letter that says you can,
We're just starting the process. I'm here to get your comments,
get- yep.
and if you have a concern,
And
we
you've already-
certainly will address that.
okay, and you've also already addressed my second point, because how many affordable units are we looking at in this 26 units?
25% will be affordable as the typical
So how many
requirement.
units would be affordable?
Well, under 26, it'd be, we require to go to the 28, the 25% of that, so there'd be 7 affordables.
Okay, okay,
If we go down to the 24, there'll only be 6 affordables.
okay, good. Board members, any other questions before we turn it over to his engineer? Okay,
Great, thank you.
thank you.
Can you move this a little closer, Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry, I meant to, or I should have emailed this to you so you could have put it up on the board, but I didn't. Sorry. Patrick does have.
Can you position that so that
Yes.
it can get on the screen, on, Patrick, are you zooming in on this?
Other way,
Other way?
other way.
Camera's over here. Camera's up here. We're looking at. No worries.
Thank you. That's good.
So, Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is John Glosser, Glosser Engineering, 46 East Street in East Walpole. So I'm not going to, unless you want me to, give you a location of this. I think everybody knows where this property is. It's off of Pinnacle Drive. and it abuts the single-family houses on Pinnacle Drive and the Neponset River in the back. Just for clarification, this is the lot here that now will have a single-family house. The lot that's shown along Pinnacle that doesn't have a house now is the one where there'll be a single-family house. So the proposal, as you can see, is to access the property where there's frontage on Pinnacle Drive for this lot, which is this piece of property here. So there'll be a driveway coming down. There'll be a turn to the right, turn to the left, buildings to the right that abut, it's at Rose Court, the Rose Court condominiums here. These buildings abutting the Neponset River, and then the driveway here. There's a cul-de-sac on this side, and there's essentially a hammerhead on this side for the safety emergency access portion of the layout. As far as the topography here, as everyone probably already knows, this part of the property is much lower than Pinnacle Drive. If you walk out there and walk to the back of some of these lots, you're actually looking down at the property. And you can see from the contour lines, it's as much as 12, 14 feet, 16 feet maybe below the backyards of these houses. So the proposal is to construct a few retaining walls, one here, and then one along the back, to help raise this site up so that our access road is in compliance with standards for how steep a road should be in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not necessarily your local regulations, but the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So AASHTO has different slopes for different climates and different topography. So you might find steeper roads in New Hampshire than you would down here, so to speak, because of their topography. This road, though, once you get down from Pinnacle, this road's going to be fairly level, so that's not really an issue. And I know your question's going to be, how steep is that, John? So that's 10%. But there is a leveling area at the top that's about 30 feet long, so you drive up, and then you stop, look left, look right, and then proceed. So you're on like a 2% slope here, which is pretty much standard procedure. So I think the planning board allows you to go to 3%.
Go to what? The planning board allows what?
I think they allow 3% on the planning board rules and regulations in that, when you're coming up to a stop or coming down a hill to stop. Kind of going by memory, so don't, you can look that up. I'm sure it's 3%. So, as I said, these buildings will be, or there will be a retaining wall to sort of raise the whole site up. I think it's about, let's say, 10 to 12 feet, depending on where you are along the retaining wall. So as far as sewer, there's a sewer stub which comes in from Rose Court into this property. It's an 8-inch stub, and that's where we will be connecting the sewer. And then we're just going to bring the sewer along and connect all of the buildings in. Water, there's an 8-inch water main in Pinnacle Drive, so that will be brought down and teed off to service all of the units and provide fire protection for each one of these. Well, for the units that are 3 or more. Fire protection, so there'll be sprinkler systems in the units where the buildings have more than 2 units. And then, and also 1-inch domestic lines. As far as drainage, so we're going to capture our drainage in catch basins, and then we have 2 underground stormwater infiltration basins. They're under the ground, so one at this end and one at this end. This site is subject to a drainage pipe, which comes from Pinnacle and then runs through a pipe and out directly into the Neponset River. So we would propose to take that runoff, because that runoff was built, or that subdivision was built prior to the current stormwater management regulations, which require us to mitigate for flow, for the increase in the rate, and for water quality. So we would propose to intercept that water and then do the best we can to mitigate the flow by putting as much of it as we can into our infiltration system, and also provide mitigation for quality by, if you can just get, I don't know, here, it would probably be either 1/2 inch or 1 inch of rainfall into the ground so that we meet our requirement for quality. So that would be sort of a bonus. Right now, as far as I know, that system on Pinnacle Drive is just set of catch basins going to drain manholes and directly into the, I think there might be some sort of infiltration basin there, but believe me, it's not much, if there is one. But I talked it over with Lou, and I think sort of told him the best thing to do, since we're going to be working right where that drain pipe is to, intercept it and make it as close to the stormwater management regulations as possible, which might be that we would meet it 100%. So I think that's about all. Other questions that you might have don't have a lot to do with me, as far as like lighting and traffic and things like that. We just simply did the civil part of it: sewer, water, drain, grading, location of the buildings, and that kind of work as far as laying out the project. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Board members, any questions? Go ahead, boss.
You mentioned the retaining wall adjacent to the river is going to be, I think you said 10 to 12 feet?
Yeah.
And are you planning to raise the grade so that, right now there's that slope that you mentioned from the existing homes, and then it's, I think you said 12 to 16 feet or so down to where the structures are. Are you planning to raise that grade? And
We're
if so-
gonna, yes, we're gonna raise that grade, but we're gonna still be well below those buildings. There's no way you can raise it up to that height.
Right.
Might be able to give you for instance, so this is 138, this contour right here. In our finished grades on our buildings are, the top of concrete's 121. So we're still 17 feet below.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it looks like there's a retaining wall on both sides, one adjacent to the river and one at the bottom of the slope from the existing homes there. The infiltration, will that basically confine the infiltration to that area, or will that be able to escape?
That water will still come onto this property. All of this, anything that's flowing off-site will be included in the stormwater management.
But the infiltration that you show in the cul-de-sac there, that's in between. I'm just sort of picturing it as almost like a swimming pool. Has two very large retaining walls, and then you're just infiltrating a bunch of water into something that has sides to it. I'm just trying to get a clarification as to that water is ultimately going to discharge into the Neponset.
All of the water eventually discharges into the Neponset, but our goal would be to, at a minimum, recharge back into the ground, what's going back into the ground now, but our goal would be to try to do would be to infiltrate as much as is economically and physically possible to do. I mean, certainly there's some economics involved, but for the most part, it's gravelly soil. I think the soil maps might show it as altered soil, but test pits have shown that for the most part it's gravel soil, which is generally favorable to infiltrating the water back into the ground. But if you didn't ask this question, I'm going to answer it. We can't create a dam and block any water that's coming off from the neighbors. We're going to accommodate that and put that into the design. So, basically we have to identify the complete watershed to the property and then take it from there. And then the second part of it, as I said, is the existing drain pipe that's taking essentially the front yards of the houses on Pinnacle and the yards, including the front and probably even the rear yards of the houses on the other side. So it's probably a fairly large watershed area. We haven't actually started to formulate the stormwater report because of what happened with the sort of the pause here. So we had just started that and kind of told to stand down.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other board members? Patrick, do you want
No,
to?
I was just going to pick up on that point, John. I think for this board to be able to review going forward and however it is, we definitely need that stormwater management report. We need a landscaping plan, we need a truck turning plan, lighting plan. All that information is needed for a thorough review.
Yeah, I understand, yeah. Yeah, some of that is going to come from other engineers or architects. I mean, we don't do lighting, so some of it's going to come from others, but we certainly understand that all of those items are necessary for you to make your decision.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public. Are there any neighbors or people that want to comment on the development at Pinnacle, the proposed development at Pinnacle Point? Come on up.
How you doing? My name is Dave Corbett. I live at 7 Pinnacle, which unfortunately is the house with like 18 townhouses buried around it. And I was just really wondering if you could really provide some insight into the next steps into the process. So personally, I don't oppose all development. I really don't, as long as it's reasonable, fits with the neighborhood, works with the current neighborhood. Unfortunately, I don't think this one does. There's a lot of concerns around safety and traffic, environmental, sewage, etc. So really just trying to understand the next steps. You mentioned, Mr. Lee, that it goes till November. So what is the process until then? And what is your role as part of being part of the ZBA as part of that? And maybe more importantly, what should we be doing as concerned abutters to prepare for these meetings a little bit more? And there's a lot of people from Pinnacle here. There's a lot of people from Darwin here. I think Darwin has an attorney here. So I'm really just trying to understand this process, understand this plan. I've seen several plans. If you could give any insight so we could be prepared, I think that'd be appreciated.
So this being a 40B application, the zoning board sits for all other town boards except Conservation and the Board of Health. So what we're going to look at is any, all the regular concerns that other boards would have. That's why they call it a comprehensive permit. They come in, they come to the zoning board, and it's a one-stop. The idea is to streamline it, make it easier for to create affordable housing in the community. As you know, Walpole does not meet our affordable housing criteria. That's why this is, in your backyard.
Yep.
So the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to get the rest of the plans, and I'll also add that we have online all the submittals from the applicant, plans, letters of eligibility, That you can find at the zoning board website, if you've seen that. I hope
I've read
everybody's had a chance to check that out, because that shows you all the information that we have. As it comes to us, that's what we posted online. Procedurally, what's going to happen next is we're going to take all this engineering information from the applicant, and there'll be a peer review for this. We do it for all 40B projects where the applicant pays for somebody, an outside company to come in. They work for the zoning board of appeals, but the applicant pays for it. The money goes through the town. The applicant doesn't pay the people directly. So that's going to be coming up where the outside firm will evaluate definitely stormwater, definitely the engineering, a few of the other things, but it is not an engineered design, it's just a peer review of it.
Yep.
And then they advise the zoning board and say, hey, these things should change, this looks good, this is acceptable for regular engineering standards. And then it'll be a public hearing process where neighbors have a chance to say what they like about the project, what they don't like about the project, and we try to work with the applicant to come up with the best possible project for the town, for the neighbors, and understanding that we're here because Walpole doesn't have 10% affordable housing according to
Yep.
Mass Community and Housing and Community Development. So.
Yep.
Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
no, that's helpful. And, I don't oppose affordable housing. Obviously, like I said, I don't even oppose development as long as it's done properly. So hopefully we can come to some sort of agreement where it's not necessarily that, or maybe something in the middle. So, yeah, that's helpful. And are these meetings monthly or?
No, we're going to, after tonight's meeting, we've already got a plan to schedule things to move along. As I said, the zoning board has to have a decision on this rather complex project
Yeah.
by November.
Yeah.
And so I think we've already got some tentative dates scheduled out. So
Sounds good.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm Debbie Driscoll, my husband Ken, and Portanover, and I live at 27 Pinnacle. And I oppose it just because I think it's ugly, and all those gorgeous, gorgeous trees will be cut down back there. So I'll just speak with emotion. I don't know anything about that. But what I do know is this area right here is wetlands, and I can see it from my backyard. So it just sounds like you're gonna create like a big swamp back there. So hopefully all of this paperwork will be in line to say what happens when this gets wet, which it does, and you can walk back there. And I was wondering, how tall is the wall that's gonna go along here?
So you're talking this wall.
Yes.
It's fairly tall, probably about 22 feet or so.
So you're gonna have a 22, you're gonna basically cut down all the trees back there along the river, right?
You know what? Just.
You're gonna cut down all the trees along the river and build a 12-foot wall and a 22-foot wall and put in so many units and basically create a big puddle or something at the end. So I would rather get together with the neighborhood and contribute to buying the land that they need. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else on this one?
Did you say we're going to have another chance to speak?
Oh, yeah, there's going to be a number of hearings, and we'll, what's that proposed next hearing?
So, we took a look, Lauren and I, at the summer schedule. I know initially we were thinking of once a month, but due to the caseload,
So what's the date?
the 26th.
Of July.
July.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is continuing this case until July 26th, and at 7 o'clock here at Town Hall. And at that point, we're going to have more of the engineering plans, we're going to have more information from the applicant, and we're going to be talking about moving forward with a peer review at that point. So that brings me to the next thing I want to talk to you, Mr. Petrosi. Peer review, we've talked to Tetra Tech, we've used them in the past. Are you able to you know, are you willing to pay the peer review, $15,000 for a peer review on this?
Well, I'd like to look at the scope that you've proposed to Tetra Tech so that we can make sure that they're not duplicating or overstepping what they should be reviewing.
Okay. So with that, because I'm trying to move the process along, what we went with was an estimate of what it would cost. Just as you haven't provided all the engineering details and the plans, we can't provide them with a full scope of the work.
Understood.
So what I'm trying to do is, if you're willing to commit to that, then we can move the process forward. If not, we're going to be talking about this in July, and it's going to just delay the process.
I have no objections to the paying for the peer review. I think what we really should do is let us compile all the information that's necessary that the board's looking for, and then start the peer review. And if the board needs an extra 30 days or so at the end of the line, we'll gladly extend the time for the board to review them.
Hey, do you want to extend the time right now today?
No, not really, because I don't know
well,
how quickly we can.
Yeah.
But you can have my word, on this particular project, there's a lot of moving parts, let's say. There's dialogue with the neighborhood that we'd like to have, and we also would like to have some dialogue with the Conservation Commission as well. So on this particular project, we'll be accommodating extension as the board deems appropriate.
Okay.
That you have my word on that.
So at this point, are you willing to make a payment for $15,000 for Tetra Tech to start the peer review?
I'd rather wait till the July
Okay.
26th meeting, to be honest with you. Just let us get all the information together and start the peer review so that there's no crisscrossing of information.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So what we're going to do is we're going to continue this hearing until July 26th. Does a board member want to make a motion at the request of the applicant to continue until July 26th here at Town Hall at 7 PM?
So moved.
Moved by Bob. Second by Drew. Any further discussion? And this is just to continue it, and we'll be back here a month from now talking about this. Okay? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain, so carried. And voting on this are the the regular members, the 4 regular members, and Mark. Okay. Okay. That concludes this part of the hearing. Now we're going to move to the second hearing we have tonight, which is very similar, remand case for Darwin Lane. So if you're leaving, just please be quiet as you step out. This is case number 22-10, Wall Street Development Corporation LLC, with respect to property located at Darwin Lane, map 42, parcels 240 and 227-13 for a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws 40B, section 20 through 23 as amended, to allow the construction of 28 home ownership, non-age restricted condominium townhouses in 6 buildings on approximately 3.44 acres. And if you were here earlier, you heard the bit about how this was remanded, meaning sent back to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because although we did have a letter stating that we were in safe harbor from 40B developments, that was no longer viewed as applicable because the developer in that case did not draw the building permits. And that, we're talking about the South Walpole development. Okay, so at this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to the applicant as we did before. And Mr. Petrosi, you can walk us through what's being proposed on Darwin.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you correctly stated, this is a project with 28 townhouse home ownership condominiums at the end of Darwin Road, approximately 3.6 acres. We were here a good year or so ago when we presented the project. It's fairly simple. access is from the cul-de-sac off of Darwin Lane to a common drive, which will serve us as the access for the 28 units. Not quite sure I can add any more to that than what we've already submitted in the record. We've provided traffic analysis, and I think the only thing we're reviewing at this point is drainage, which is, we just recently were on the site doing some test pits last week or the week before, and we will be providing the town with a stormwater management report. And again, John Gloss, I can speak to any technical questions that you have.
Mr. Petrosi, one question, have you done the fire truck analysis as far as turning radiuses on this?
I don't believe we've provided it, but I think it's been done.
Okay. Again, we need, you know,
Yes, yes,
for a
I
full package, we need all that information.
Understand,
Okay.
understand.
Okay,
We're new at this.
we're not. Mr. Glasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's John Gloss at 46 East Street in East Walpole, Gloss Engineering. So, again, I think everybody knows the location. It's Darwin Lane off of Common Street. I think it's about 1,000-foot road or so, ends in a cul-de-sac at this location here. So there's actually two pieces of property put together, make this one piece of property. And similar to Pinnacle, this property is quite a bit lower than the street here, so we'll be coming down here. It's a little bit less steep. I think this is about an 8% slope versus the 10% slope on the other side. And we're not really, we're showing a level area, but again, we're not really all that worried about that because there's no reason really to stop at the top of this. I mean, you don't want to go flying out of here at 30 miles an hour, but I don't think there'd be a stop sign required there, but that would be more of a traffic engineer. So we're going to come down here, turn to the right or turn to the left. This side has a cul-de-sac, this side has a hammerhead, and then you can see the buildings placed around the lot there. This proposal also requires a retaining wall, which would be located right here. That wall, the top of that wall, this isn't a very high wall, so the top is 224 and the bottom is about 219, so it's about, let's say, a 6-foot wall right in this location here, and that's just so that the grading behind these units can allow any water runoff to run in this direction and not have water running directly towards the building. Again, we show underground infiltration, and we're just showing it all the way along the access roadway here at the bottom of the slope. So this site is mostly cut on this side of this road and then filled on the other side of the driveway here. So that's pretty much the grading. This site is definitely sand and gravel, so it's glacial outwash. I did 4 or 5 test pits out here a couple weeks ago, and it's pretty much just what we thought. When you're on the side of the hill here, you can dig down 12 feet or so, no water table, just nothing but gravel all the way down. This may have been an esker at one time, big hill forever. And then at the bottom, it flattens out, so we do see water table down there. We didn't actually, we see indications of water table. This time of year, we don't usually see water in that type of soil. But even that was at 8 feet depth. And those test pits were taken down here. So this will be fairly simple to design the stormwater management system here. And water system, there's an 8-inch one in Darwin Lane, so we're going to extend that. And then that left and right here, any buildings that are more than 8 units or more will have a sprinkler system, so I think that includes all of the buildings here, fire suppression systems, and domestic water into each building. And then as far as sewage, because we're so far below Darwin Lane, we're going to put a pump here. We've already contacted F.R. Mahoney, who are the suppliers of E1 pumps. And so all the sewage from these buildings most likely will come to one spot. I think we show it. Right now, we show it on this version, but we show it in here and then pumped up to Darwin Lane. Depending on costs, that actually may change where these units might pump right into that force main, which is something that we do all the time. But someone like F.R. Mahoney, who supplies the pumps, sells you the pumps, they have their own engineers that design these systems. I've used them many times in the past. They'll probably do the layout and the cost analysis for us. I think that's pretty much all I can tell you about this site. Again, other items like lighting and things like that, landscaping, are really not something that we do, but there'll either be a lighting engineer or a landscape architect or a landscape designer who will lay that stuff out for you. But mostly we just do the civil end of it, sewer, water, drain, access, that sort of stuff. So any questions I can answer, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay, you talked about stormwater. You haven't completed the stormwater management plan?
No, but I would say we're farther along here than we are on Pinnacle. The one thing that's sort of tripping us up here is that the stormwater from Darwin Lane goes through a number of infiltration basins, like leach pits and dry wells right here. The whole subdivision is connected to that. So we've developed our, pre-development model, but we don't know how big these things are. We've been trying to chase around to find out, does John Anderson design this? If anybody has any information. It seems that, the subdivision plans aren't quite available. I thought I had them in my office, but I don't. So at some point, I think we're going to go out there and measure those, and then we'll be on our way. So that might be.
Well, I'm particularly concerned about the proximity to the town drinking water supply with the wellheads very close to this. So my question is, are you looking at this because extra careful with the stormwater management because of the proximity to the drinking water wells?
So again, Mr. Chairman, we look at both stormwater quality and quantity. So for stormwater quality, in this location, most likely we're going to be putting all of the stormwater back into the ground. So we would be looking at things like nitrogen and phosphorus, right? So mostly nitrogen. The way to sort of double down on the nitrogen. So first of all, we're required to make sure that our first inch of runoff is treated. But under the stormwater, we're treating it for suspended solids, not necessarily for nitrogen or phosphorus. But the way to ensure that it's not a problem is source control. So you're going to put conditions on as far as the use of fertilizers, and we don't have to worry about septic systems. So you're going to put conditions on about the use of fertilizers here, and that would be my recommendation. It's source control. It's the only way you're going to control that adequately. And because it's multifamily, condominium or apartments, that's fairly easy to regulate, right? Unlike a single-family house. So you can put conditions on, and then you can have monitoring, or at least, or have, affidavits or whatever you need from the person who's maintaining this site to say that's what they're doing.
Okay. And we'd also be concerned probably about gas, oils, greases, solvents, things like that. So I'm not sure how much the stormwater is going to be able to address those.
Well, so all modern catch basins, right, that are done now, right, have extra-large sumps, and they have hooded outlets so that anything that floats gets trapped in the catch basins. It can't get out of the catch basins.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, any other questions for Mr. Glasser? Okay, Judy?
Mr. Glosser, I'm looking at a lovely colored map here in your book. It doesn't have a page number. And it locates the site locus conveniently on the edge of the water supply overlay. So,
Right. This line right here, in fact, this land was purchased from, I forget the fellow's name, but it was purchased from him so that the town could own 400 feet from the
400
wellhead.
feet.
That's what's required in Massachusetts.
do you have a map that could show us, or me, or everybody here, where the wells are?
Well, I know the well is.
No, I know,
the
John.
nearest one's 400 feet from this street.
John, do you have a map that will depict where the map, from your plans to where the wells
Do
are?
I have that map now?
Will you be providing that map?
I don't know, what do you want to? Yeah, we'll provide it to you.
I have concern that it's just sort of so marginal, just,
No, I understand, but the nearest well, we can get a map from the town, I'm sure they have that, and then we can, merge that with this plan. But I know in fact that the nearest well is 200 feet from that line right there, because back in the 1980s, mid-1980s, the town actually purchased that piece of property from the abutter. And actually, at that time, there was, the abutter had a cesspool in there, so I think the town actually paid to have that cesspool abandoned and a new septic system put in for that abutter. So I remember that distinctly from,
well, I just want to say I'm concerned with its proximity to the overlay.
understood.
It's, those things of leaching into the ground are so not controllable by conditioning fertilizers and things like that. We're talking about our water supply. And for obvious reasons, that land was not built on or developed until this application. It's very, very close. 400 feet to me is very close to the well. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Patrick?
John, what's the percentage of impervious for the site?
Patrick, I don't know right off the top of my head, but I can
Okay.
provide that information with you. Certainly, in the stormwater management report, it's going to identify, the existing watershed area and how much of that is impervious, and then the proposed and how much of that is impervious. And you can sort of get it from that, but we can provide a separate category to tell you exactly what it is.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm just, last year when this was brought up, we had a letter from the Sewer and Water Commission that expressed similar concerns in terms of, the amount of cut and fill happening there, the amount of impervious. That's just one element. Obviously density is what it is, but the amount of percentage of impervious there, having a low impact development, I think is far more beneficial for a site like this. But
No, I understand what you're saying, but in Walpole, as in most towns where I work, where there's wells, when you're within the wellhead protection area, right? So every town, this town goes a little bit beyond, but every town has a state designated Zone 2 wellhead protection area. And in that protection area, the state recommends that any new development does not cover with impervious surfaces more than 15%. But it also allows you to sort of artificially mimic what would happen if by injecting the water, say, the stormwater back into the ground. So this town does it through a special permit with the planning board. So here, I can guarantee you that just because of the way we have to do the stormwater management, that we're going to meet the state's, requirement, and therefore meet the town's requirement for special permit. So we're not asking for a special permit, but that, you see what I'm saying? So here, I'm going to guess that most of this water is going back into the ground because it's the right way to handle it rather than having, runoff at different locations.
I have one quick question.
Yeah, true.
Mr. Glossop, if I understand correctly, and I apologize, I haven't looked as closely, but looking at the elevations, everything, just summarize, everything from Darwin sheds onto this parcels, and then if I look at all the elevations, they all shed into the well area. Is that correct in understanding that? I understand you're going to put all these provisions in and necessary means to filter that, but if, just in a very summarized, quick fashion, this development is being proposed at a lower elevation than Darwin, and yet everything after that is going to be shedding into our well drinking water. Is that correct?
Well, it's all within the zone too, so I would say you're essentially correct. I'm not going to say you're 100% correct because I don't really know, but you're probably pretty close to 100% correct.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Bob?
You mentioned that the likely handling of the sanitary sewage is through a pump station. What sort of contingencies are there for the failure of that pump, and would there be a bypass that would result in a discharge either somewhere on the site or some other location?
So there is no bypass, but there's sort of two parts of it. One is that the wet well has a certain volume in it. We haven't really designed this yet, or F.R. Mahoney hasn't helped us design this yet. But the wet well has a certain volume in it. So if for some reason the pump fails, there'll be obviously an alarm. There's both, there's be a visual and an audio alarm to let someone know that the pump has failed. And it's not as if as soon as that alarm comes on, there is sewage being discharged onto the ground. So the alarm comes on, which gives whoever the operator is going to be here time to call. The first call probably should be to a Jay Hockman or All Seasons, someone to come and empty the wet well. So now you're going to have even more volume while you figure out what went wrong with the pump. So that's pretty much standard procedure where a development such as this would have a contract with a local pumper. So if you contracted with Hockman, he'd probably pump it and also provide the expertise to, help you fix the pump. So
it's mostly taken care of by the volume of the wet well.
yeah, so we'll work with F.R. Mahoney. I mean, we don't really rise to the level of Title V. It's under the sewer regulations. So, but it will be fairly significant amount of volume between what we call the high water alarm and the actual pipe coming into the wet well from the buildings.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions from board members?
I just had a question, Mr. Chairman, we had a memo from the Sewer and Water Commission from last year, 2022, are they going to comment again?
I hope so.
Okay. I'd just like to read one comment that they made since Mr. Delaney brought up the grades of the project. This is from a memo from the Sewer and Water Commission, May 23, 2022. Given the steep grades of this project, the commission is concerned that the excavation of existing soil in some areas and the filling of other areas and how it will impact the water quality being drawn into the Washington Well Number 5. Excavation will reduce the amount of soil that filters surface water as it goes into the ground. And filling the low areas will most likely result in the hard packing of soil hindering the filtering of surface water into the groundwater. I think everyone understands how it rains and the water goes into the ground, and I think this is very clear to me that when you go and excavate and fill, you're changing what Mother Nature created as a natural filter for our well. And I do hope they make another comments on this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's going to be one of the big concerns here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be argumentative, but the infiltration basin is over natural soil. We don't take the gravel out to put that in. We want to leave the gravel there. So it is, and then, another point is, and again, the Darwin Lane was built before there were any stormwater management regulations, but, again, Darwin Lane, similar to Pinnacle, just sort of dumps the water into the ground with no treatment at all. So this,
Okay.
we've come a long way since
John?
those days.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, are we on the same time schedule as we are for the Pinnacle till November?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it exactly the same or slightly
George,
slightly adjusted?
I
but-
think it's the same, because so, when we invoked Safe Harbor at that start of the interlocutor, what was it? At the first meeting.
So May 11th was due to.
May 11th is when we got the decision or the ruling from HAC. So in a way, that's starting the clock again, for both of them.
But we're tracking all that as far as the timing.
I think it's November 6th.
Okay.
Just FYI, I mean, this project compared to Pinnacle is a lot easier to design from our point of view, so you probably get more information more quickly from Darwin than you will from Pinnacle. Pinnacle's has some challenges. on that.
Well, either way, we need that information so
No,
that
understood.
we can move forward and.
Understood.
And,
Understood.
And I know it's not you, you're the one working on it, but this stuff should have been all part of the application, the original application, and we'd move forward from there, but, okay. At this time, unless board members, any other questions or comments? I'd like to open it up to the public if people have, want to comment on the proposed 40B at the end of Darwin.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Dennis Murphy from Hill Law on behalf of most of the people in this room, I think, the abutters. I was here a year ago, and I think I was here a year before that, both times arguing safe harbor for this exact project. So it feels like a little deja vu. Some faces look new to me. One of the things I did to prepare for the public hearing was go back in history and find out how we got here. I did submit a letter, and I'm not going to reiterate what I said in my letter, just provide a little more flavor. So we have the same owner who asked for the subdivision where many of these people live on Darwin Lane in 1996, put a plan in front of the planning board, and was granted the waiver to extend the dead end by a few hundred feet beyond the 750. In other words, he got what he asked for. Some years later, he went back and wanted a little bit more. The planning board said no. And then 18 years after that, just 6 months ago, he went back again for the same 5-lot subdivision to the same board and got the same answer. So I know you probably know this, but I'm going to state the obvious. He's coming to you to get what he couldn't get 3 different times from 2 different times from another board. The reason that's significant is a couple of, one is you have been in the mix because during all of that, he also came to you with an alternative. Well, if you won't give me my 28, how about give me 12? So part of the reason on the first hearing night, you're here with a really rudimentary set of plans, no calcs, no site investigation. You don't know what kind of soils are out there. You don't know the basics. Is because this is not the project. This isn't what's going to be built. His number is 12. He would take 5. My folks might accept some number in the midst of that. So the reason I say that up front is you've got another 40B behind us, a real one. You've got another project that's in tandem with this one, and you have the same developer with several other things in the pipeline. I sat where you sit today for 10 years in my town and dealt with a deluge of 40Bs, which is how you become a 40B lawyer, your town council notwithstanding. He came by it honestly, I think. But the reason I say that is you're volunteers, and I'm happy to come back and see you in July, but I have an alternative before we get there. Unlike Pinnacle, because this was a subdivision and because there was a prior application for a 5-lot subdivision that he went back to while this was at HAC, you now have, I believe, the ability to invoke safe harbor yet again. I know I never believed I would be here 3 times arguing safe harbor on the same project. It's a different safe harbor. Last time it was the HPP. I thought you had a good argument. It turns out you got the benefit of your hiatus, the benefit of your safe harbor, because it took that long for it to get decided. It's a shame it came out the way it did, but this one is much more clear. You're not allowed under the rules to use 40B as leverage. It's not supposed to be a stalking horse. You're not supposed to be able to say, well, if the town won't give me what I want, I'm going to do 40B. This is a textbook example of that. He's done it twice. He did it, I think, 2005, and he did it again just 6 months ago. And he got the same answer. And I think that if it weren't for the machinery of 40B, every single one of you would tell him the same thing, which is, if the fire chief says you shouldn't waive the length of a dead-end road, who are we to say otherwise? So what I suggest, and based on what I've put in my letter, is that you could invoke safe harbor yet again. I realize it is not what I expected, that you would do this 3 times. I don't think it's disregarding, because the HAC didn't address this. You had no way of knowing, because when you invoked it last year when I was here, he hadn't gone back to the planning board. So the reason to do so is that, the rules are the rules, and actions have consequences. If you don't invoke it, he's able to game the system, and there's no repercussion. The regulation is really, really clear. If you try to get zoning relief, and it says very clearly, special permit, variance, subdivision is in the regulation. If you try to get that approved, you've got to sit down for 12 months. It's very clear in the regulation. So what that gives you is the ability to focus on these other projects that do have to go forward. And so I would urge you to invoke it, and we'll see what happens with that. Now, just invoking it doesn't mean that we have to have a big fight about it. Plenty of developers could say, well, you have the right to say what you want to say, but I'm going to make my presentation and you can vote it up or down anyway. If you invoke it, the ball's in his court. We don't have to have a fight about it. That's up to him. What I will say is it makes it possible for you to fast track this, and if you're inclined to deny the project, I think most people in this room would say, go ahead and deny it. We're the ones that are going to suffer the consequences. And their consensus, am I right about that? Their consensus is that, look, this is enough, and you guys are volunteers, you've been dealing with this long enough. Short of that, let me just say one other thing, because I did take in everything. I've done a lot of 40Bs. You are all absolutely right to be concerned about the effect on the public water supply, and I will tell you, not many things in the law trump the need for housing under 40B, but guess what? There is one, and it's water, public water. I won that case in 2015, so you're on very solid ground if you wanted to invoke safe harbor, deny the project, and say, we're looking to protect the public water supply. And the last thing I'll say is, you're all experienced in different things, but I would urge you to get the board get its own peer reviewer who is an expert, not just a civil engineer, someone who is an expert like a hydrologist, someone who delineates Zone 1 and Zone 2, who can actually advise the board and the town on whether these conditions that might be proposed will actually protect that well number 5. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else want to comment?
Scott Meehan from Pinnacle Drive. First of all, very well said. Been a long-term resident since I've been 2 years old in this town. I wasn't going to say anything in the last meeting, but just listening to the second meeting, I had to stand up and say something. First of all, thank you for all of you, because I don't know how you do it, because I would be pulling my hair out, saying that coming up unprepared, don't have the answers, don't send things in advance so you can review and at least have questions ready to go. I think that is a game plan that is unfortunate that they're playing. Where I'm going with this, though, being a long-term resident, I've seen this town grow up. I've seen the development. And when I look at these plans, whether it's Darwin or Pinnacle, it's not development. I'm sorry to say this, it's greed looking at that, just trying to jam all those apartments and condos in these small little places and beautiful areas, whether it's near the water or along the river. It's, work with the community. That's why there's so many people here from Darwin, so many people here from Pinnacle earlier, that people don't support this. Not because it's development, it's because it's the way he's doing it. And it comes down to just greed, not trying to work for the community. So, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay. Anybody else want to comment? Okay. That being said, what we're going to do is we're going to continue this until also July 26th. July 26th at 7 o'clock here at Town Hall. And same thing, we need more information, Mr. Petrosi, as far as stormwater, the final engineering, and even lighting, landscaping plans, things like that. So, okay. So, sure, yep.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Tom Dunleavy, 27 Darwin. Just moved in recently, so I haven't had the pleasure of sitting through a lot of these, but thank you for your time and all you guys do. I was just reviewing some of the documentation he previously presented, one of them being the traffic study, and I think that is a big concern of everyone here. It says during peak hours we have 14 cars coming in the morning and 19 in the evening. I work from home. I sit in that court. I think about 14 people turn around alone in the morning, not even just passing through or going. It's a natural road that people come to, turn their cars around, and leave. So I don't know if there's any way we could look at another traffic study, but these numbers seem exceedingly low, especially from someone who literally sits there and watches cars go by all day. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay. And we will have, if necessary, we will have traffic peer review. Okay. Does a board member want to make a motion to continue until July 26th at, did you have?
I just had one, yeah, I just want to make one.
Go ahead, Judy.
Could you, if I don't think it's out of line, could we have a more definitive list of what's missing from this application? Other than lighting, et cetera, and then et cetera. I'd like to know all the things that are going to be done before the next meeting. Everything that's missing. Do we
Yeah.
have a list, specific list?
Yeah, we have a list of what's required in a 40B application, and a lot is missing, so, yeah, we know what's, I mean. we
Okay,
can
as long as,
figure out
yeah,
what's
I just
missing.
want to make it clear that it's not a et cetera list, okay? Thank you.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to continue until July 26th at 7 PM here at Town Hall?
So moved.
Moved by Drew,
Second?
second by Bob. Any further discussion on continuing? All those in favor of continuing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay, so we will be back here for this on July 26th. Okay, thank you, everybody. Next, we have the East Street development, Gilmore's site. This is a new case for us. Tonight's the first night we've heard this one. Case number 23-21, AIG Silver Strand Walpole LLC, 891, 989, and 1015 East Street, map 25 parcels, 164, 165, 166, comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, 20 to 23, as amended to allow the construction of a 6-story building with 142 apartment units below and below-grade garage. Okay, so my only request is people leave because we do have another hearing taking place. If everybody could just keep quiet as they exit. Okay. Okay, so is the applicant here? Are you the- Okay, okay. Never felt so disrespected, like. Oh, beautiful. And Patrick in the back, are you able to pick up these images on the screen? Okay, so we've read the legal announcement, and now what I'd like to do is have the development team, if you want to introduce yourselves, explain your roles, and we'll get going.
Sure, appreciate it.
You want to come to the microphone up here?
Okay.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jeff Engler from Strategic Land Ventures. I'm a principal member in SLV Silver Strand Walpole LLC, which is the applicant of the 40B that we'll be presenting to you this evening. It's a pleasure to introduce this project to the Zoning Board of Appeals. As you may or may not be aware, we've really been in collaboration with the town in earnest since August of, what year is it? 2021. So this is something that has evolved over the last 20 months or so based on many meetings with municipal departments, Board of Selectmen, town manager, parties of interest, and we're excited to be with you tonight. Would you scroll through? Yeah, no, that's the first slide. Okay, great. So I'm joined by some of our team members tonight that will be presenting to you. Steve Regal from Embark is going to be presenting the architecture. John Cusich from Bowler is going to be presenting the civil engineering. Leslie Fanger, also from Bowler, is going to be presenting our landscape architecture, and Jeff Dirk from Vanasan Associates is going to be presenting traffic. We have some other team members who you can see as well, but those disciplines are less essential in terms of the overall program and will be leveraged as needed throughout the public hearing process. Next slide. So as you all know, the town's gone to great lengths as part of its housing production plan to identify its housing needs. we believe our proposal checks many of the boxes. Moreover, support of this project, as you all know, will allow the town to not only move closer to its 10% safe harbor status and control all future 40B applications, but also get additional certification on its HPP. So we believe that this application checks many of the boxes that your own HPP has identified as important housing needs within this municipality, which is one of the reasons we're enthusiastic about this application, one of the reasons we believe the Board of Selectmen endorsed this application, and one of the reasons that we believe that the town in general, through this collaborative process, has been very supportive of the overall program. So as you all are aware, where you stand on the SHI, where you stand within your own HPP, this project being a rental project, you count all 142 units on your subsidized housing inventory. I'm speaking out of school, I believe, but the first two applications tonight, I think, were both home ownership, where you only count the affordable units. So this will be a big movement, so to speak, on your SHI, counting not only the affordable units, but the market units. So, Justin, you can flip through as I talk. We have a lot of slides here of the existing site. I'm not sure how familiar, I'm sure you're all familiar of the site maybe from the street, but we tried to, you can just keep flipping. We tried to, to provide an accurate description of the current use of the site, which is Gilmore's. But we believe, and listen, we're not speaking out of school when we say the site has not been particularly well maintained. It doesn't have much of a, aesthetic quality, certainly, to the town, nor much of an economic development quality for a downtown location. And, we obviously love the site for many reasons, but one is the proximity to downtown Walpole. We think doing a first-class residential development of this will only enhance the vibrancy of the town, bring more people to the downtown area, and further stimulate a lot of the downtown retail and commercial, which we know is important overall to the town. And also, it's smart growth, as you all know, walkable to the MBTA train station. So you can keep scrolling through, Justin, before we... And I would note, and we'll get to this, but this two-family house, which is part of our site, 881 and 891, that was not part of our original program. And through our collaboration with the Board of Selectmen and the town, we were encouraged to acquire that site, which allowed the site plan, which we're presenting to you tonight, to actually come to fruition. It allowed us to do some things from a footprint standpoint, a traffic circulation standpoint, and a fire protection standpoint. I'm not going to read all the bullets on that slide. The purpose of this slide, and by the way, the presentation has already been delivered to the town, so it can be put on your website or made available for whoever wants it. I'm not going to read all those bullets, but the takeaway from that slide is we've had a lot of meetings with the town of Walpole since August of 2021, starting with Jim Johnson, and then graduating to the Board of Selectmen, all the municipal departments, the DPW, police, fire, planning, all has had an important seat at the table, and all has contributed thoughts, ideas, and recommendations into the program that we're presenting to you tonight. Next slide, Justin. So I'm stealing a little bit of the fire that our architect and our civil engineer is going to have as they present the technical elements of the program. But I thought it was important to show some of the key highlights and differences in the plan from what we originally presented to the town to what we're presenting tonight. And the site plan over the last 20 months has been pushed and pulled on. There's been things that the town didn't like. There's been things that the fire department has requested. And the plan that we're presenting tonight is a culmination of all of the input that we've received throughout the process. Originally, we were much closer to the train tracks. Most of our cars were parked under the building in mechanical car stackers. We had a T turnaround for the fire department. We had a zero setback to East Street. There were a whole bunch of things relative. The building was on top of our sewer easement. So there was a whole bunch of things, and this is just a highlight and a snapshot of some of the key changes, but there were some critical design changes that have occurred over that collaborative period over the last 14 months or so to arrive at the plan that we're sharing with you tonight. So with that said, what I'd like to do is we're going to walk through architecture, civil engineering, and traffic for you tonight. The board knows this. Maybe people watching on TV are a little bit less familiar if they're interested. But this is a long collaborative process. It's the first public hearing and presumably several more. So we're looking forward to hearing from you all tonight. And benefiting from your comments and your questions, and we'll endeavor to provide responses at subsequent public hearings. You all have the benefit of the big fat binder we submitted, but would like to present to you the key technical components of our plan and go from there. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Steve Regal from Embark, who's going to introduce you to the project architecture.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We really appreciate that. So located on East Street, 2 blocks from Walpole Town Common and Center, the Sanctuary East is proposed on 3 contiguous lots, currently housing 2 single-family homes and Gilmore's Pet Supply Company and outbuildings. These lots are currently zoned as industrial. The proposed project will be a 6-story multifamily residential building containing 142 apartment units over a below-grade garage. The project is approximately 171,000 gross square feet, which by comparison, Liberty Station down the street is over 200,000 square feet for 152 units. The enclosed parking garage will be accessed by a ramp and will be below grade. It will contain 59 full-size parking spaces with an additional 113 full and compact surface spaces for a total of 171. This is a parking ratio of 1.20. Liberty Station had a parking ratio of 1.39, and Union and West had a parking ratio of 1.22. The 1.20 ratio that's presented today was an increase from the original parking ratio of 0.73. Here we have the first floor of the building. The massing and exterior design of the building is a direct result of the unique site characteristics and constraints, but none more than the requirement for fire department apparatus. Due to the depth of the site and the more restrictive Massachusetts requirements for fire department access to facades, the proposed project has gone through several iterations, culminating with the current design that provides full fire truck access to all sides of the building without the need for a T-turn or cul-de-sac. A fire truck turning radius diagram is included towards the end of the package. The project site is adjacent to active train tracks. While previous iterations had the building relatively tight to the property line and tracks, the current design has pulled the building away from the train tracks to improve the acoustical comfort of the tenants. This was a big result of acquiring the adjacent 2 parcels and allowing us to rethink the project at that point. The project site also abuts the Westbury Farms building and retail areas. Based on feedback during the process with the town, the building has been pulled back and the massing significantly shifted inward to diminish the building height adjacent to the existing structure. The massing is also derived from a desire to engage the public realm on East Street without a parallel configuration that would create a wall-like feel. As the building intersects East Street at non-rectilinear angles, it creates opportunities for public engagement, resulting in volumes that break up the massing to a more residential scale. The project has also reserved space on the east side of the parcel for a town-requested public access, which will also serve as an exterior amenity to our residents, which will be covered later by our landscape architect. The ground floor of the building, thank you, slide 27. The ground floor of the building is a direct result of orienting all active building spaces along the various pockets created on East Street. Uses include a library, a lounge, leasing offices, rideshare waiting, and a co-working component. Making the best use of solar orientation, the project includes an indoor year-round pool and fitness facilities with south-facing glazing. Building services, including utilities, move-ins, and trash removal, are located facing the train tracks and are not visible from East Street. Next, please. This here is our typical floor plan, complete with elevator, two stairs, two stairs, and a double trash chute for recycling and trash. A range of apartment unit types are located on all 6 levels of the building. 8 of the 142 units will be designed as Group 2A units, otherwise known as handicap accessible, and the remainder, Group 1, will also have the 2% for the audio and visual repair that's required in Massachusetts. The units are designed to provide layouts that promote open kitchen, living, dining spaces with comfortably sized bedrooms, bathrooms, laundry, and storage areas. Next slide, please. The project will include car charging stations, and the roof will be constructed to be solar ready. Walk-up roof access and perimeter guardrails have been added at the request of the fire department, and the car charging stations were taken out of the garage and moved to surface spaces at the request of the fire department and their concern for the lithium fire battery fires. Next slide, please. This is just a very quick section to indicate the building and the different levels. And what you're seeing is you're seeing 5 stories of wood construction, which is known as type 3A construction, over 2 stories of concrete, the lowest story being below grade garage, and the first story being amenities and residential units. Next, please. The exterior aesthetic leverages the unique volumes that we've created through this process with material changes to further break down the massing. The result focuses on detailed articulation of building corners with volumes and materials pulling in between those volumes. Next, please. The use of fiber cement of varying sizes, colors, and textures allows us to maintain a residential feel, while the use of storefront and built-up cornices at street level works to engage the public. Next, please. This is a concept rendering in context showing how the building intersects East Street in non-rectilinear ways to create these different pockets. And it also shows how we've pulled away from the Westbury Farms building, and also how we've started to engage and provide that town requested access to the retail plaza, to CVS, which the landscape architect will dig a little bit more into. Next, please. What you're seeing here is you're just seeing a couple of typical units and what would be expected. Up one more, please. These are 2nd and 2 and 3 bedroom unit plans. All apartments feature open kitchens and will have in-unit washers and dryers, along with individual heating and cooling systems. They are designed to meet or exceed DHCD minimums for unit sizes, bedroom, living room sizes, storage requirements, kitchens, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. Specific attention will be placed on making this a sustainable project, carefully selecting products including appliances, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, and building materials. Next slide, please. The program features a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bed, and 3-bed units, ranging in size from 500 square feet for the studio up to just under 1,300 square feet for the 3-bedroom. As is required by, I believe, the funding, 10% of the units are 3-bedroom. Jeff, could you take me to slide 48, the fire truck diagram? Sure. While he's pulling that up, I just want to quickly just go through some of the high-level changes that we made through working with the municipality. So working with the fire department, the first thing we did with the initial design was we pulled the building further away from the the train tracks in order to provide increased access around the building, and we also enlarged the cul-de-sac in order to meet their requirements. Second, we pulled the building further back when we acquired the additional parcels, and that allowed us to get fire truck access around that side of the building. And then finally, we pulled the building away from the Westbury Farms building in order to give us access around the entire building without the use of a cul-de-sac or teaching. Again, this site is extremely deep, and so once you get over a certain distance, you need to basically be able to drive around the building. Fire department was adamant that they did not want to do any turning on the site, and so this was a direct result of our working with them. And pulling the building away this way also addressed some of the board members' concerns about traffic queuing up on East Street. So we solved two issues there. As part of the process with the fire department, the street roundings, the property entries were increased, and trees were scaled back to make sure there'd be no impediment on that fire truck access. At the roof, we provided stair access to the roof and a continuous railing for fall protection. As Jeff previously mentioned, we pulled the car stackers out of the building, which were of concern, and as I previously mentioned, we pulled the EV charging stations out to the surface because of the lithium fires. And then finally, the fire department was very concerned about smoke within the garage, and they asked us to institute an enhanced smoke removal system that would sort of be above and beyond code, and that's something that we've agreed to do. At a minimum, we would be moving CO and other gases out of the garage. But what they're looking for is really jet exhaust fan to pull that smoke out. So what we've looked at is we've got a few 2-hour entries down into the garage, and then we've strategically placed the smoke removal away from those, and we'll coordinate those controls accordingly. Just some other board member concerns that were addressed, and I hate to duplicate some of the things that Jeff said, but I'll try and go fast. The project was reduced from 148 to 142 units. The parking ratio was increased from 0.73 to 1.2. We reoriented the building to run no longer parallel with East Street. Another big move we did was the original building that we presented was actually 5 feet above grade. And through working with the town, we're doing increased excavation and pushing our garage down so that all those spaces are at street level and we can really engage the public way. And that was something that was extremely important to the town. So I think ownership was happy to make that concession. We've relocated the building's active uses. We've acquired the adjacent parcels and are going to be dressing up more of the street, more of the access to the CVS and the retail plaza. We pulled the building even more back from East Street than original in order to get more of those pocket parks. We relocated the pool to the interior. There was some concern from the board members that our elevated pool, even if it had code required fencing, was going to be more of a problem, and so they were very happy when we were able to accommodate the pool indoors and therefore have a more secure environment. We dedicated a loading and trash area, and we've added a fence to separate the project from the train tracks. And then finally, I think one of the big things, and I'm very glad that ownership was on board with this, was that the east side of the property now includes public amenities that will provide that access and dress up the entry to that retail plaza. I know there's some future plans there, and that was one of the things that they had originally asked. Now, when we first came in with the project, before we had the 2 additional parcels, it was something extremely hard to accomplish, but as soon as ownership was able to acquire those additional parcels, it really freed us up in order to provide that public amenity. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Leslie.
I'm going to interject one thing just because I think it's important and I can't help myself. Where the cursor is at co-workspace, that's actually open to the public. All right, so the entirety of the building is not, while it's a private building, one of the things that was important to Mr. Johnson, the Board of Selectmen, was to have not only an architectural engagement, but a legitimate literal engagement with members of the public. So people that don't live in this building will have access to that co-workspace if they want to come and set up their laptop or do some work or whatever. It's available to the public during, normal business hours. We haven't established exactly what those are, but that's above and beyond, some of the other things that are shown that are limited to the residents only. That co-workspace is in fact public space. Just thought that was important to highlight.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Fanger from Bowler. I'm the project landscape architect, and I'll be presenting the landscape design.
A little slow, Leslie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll start with the black and white of the landscape plan. Just to orient everyone, East Street is at the bottom of the page. The building is the hatched gray. And we'll talk a bit about site circulation for pedestrians. Say you're taking your dog for a walk and you're walking down East Street. You'll come upon a series of little parklets, small areas with a bench, some pavement, perennials, and these are located in areas where the building is sort of articulated and provides a nice space to create these little spaces along the street. As you continue down towards the front of the building where those little parking court is, there's also a nice little entrance plaza that has some benches and perennials and provides a nice place for residents to kind of gather and come upon each other and get to know one another as they enter and leave the building. There's walkways that circulate along the front and around the entire building, with the exception of the back part where the access to the garage is. There's, as we continue around to the back of the building, walkway connects up and crosses the crosswalk. And Jeff had mentioned and Steve had mentioned that there's a public open space area. And this is a nice, kind of a flexible space, an open space where people who are walking their dogs, they just want to go out and have their morning coffee. They have a place to sort of be in nature without being interrupted. And we're surrounding that space with some 4 to 5 foot high shrubs, evergreen mixed and deciduous evergreens, and that creates a nice little buffer from the adjacent uses. That walkway that connects into the public open space follows the easement, basically. So Jeff, if you want to just kind of follow the walk, we're walking down this public access walkway and then down towards the East Street. And then you can see another series of little parklets where, again, you can just stop if you're walking your dog, you can sit down, you can use a boy. And again, it's vegetated with mainly shrubs, and the reason for that is that there's an easement, utility lines underneath this space, and so we couldn't put trees there because we don't want to interrupt the utilities below. We did kind of squeeze them in where we could find space for larger trees. Then we circulate back down to East Street, and some of the other areas that are of note is going towards the co-working space. There's a nice little opening toward the left. There you go, thank you. Where we've got some decorative pattern pavement and shrubs and colorful plantings. But that's another space where we've included benches and just a place for people to intersect, get to know your neighbor. If you're living in the neighborhood, you're going to have the benefit of having these spaces along the street to really enliven the streetscape. And if you're going to the train station and you just got a phone call and you need to take a break and just sit down and take the call, there's plenty of opportunity along the street to do that. Very friendly, open, and inviting streetscape that we're creating for this development. If you want to go to the next. So, in keeping with the current trend of maintaining native plantings for all of our projects, we have created a plant list that does mostly keep in line with that, with the exception of maybe one of the, no, I think all of the plants are native. So we're not introducing anything that could be invasive or cause problems for any of the adjacent wetlands and so forth. These are just some pretty pictures of the trees and shrubs that we're proposing. Honey locust is a very durable tree. It's not susceptible to some of the more prevalent bugs and diseases that we're seeing these days, like the Asian longhorn beetle or some of the other diseases that we're seeing. Pin oak is a tried and true native. They're all over New England. Mountain laurel, cherry laurel, clethra, and hydrangeas. Maybe not a standard native, but it really does add a lot of color and is very indicative of a New England landscape. And then this rendering just kind of highlights the pedestrian circulation, the areas of opportunity for planting trees, and you'll notice that there aren't a whole lot of trees along the frontage because there are high electric lines that run along that side of East Street. So that's it. I think we could talk about the lighting. We've got a combination of bollards and street lighting. Street lighting for the parking lot. We have a high level of lighting for safety and security. And then in the areas of these little pocket parks, we've got bollard lighting that kind of have low-level lighting. It's not going to overdo it. And then at the property lines, we're trying to keep the foot candles to below 1 foot candle so that it's not an excessive light spillover. I think I'll hand it over to Doc.
Thank you, Leslie. For the record, John Cusick with Bowler Engineering. I will be very brief. A lot of what I would cover was already been covered, so I'll just try to hit a couple of highlights, but respect the hour as well. So the existing conditions plan, you're all probably very familiar of the site. The one thing I do want to point out, or two things I want to point out relative to the existing conditions plan. If you know Gilmore's, you can see it's essentially paved from side to side, left, right, up, down. It's entirely paved. Not all that attractive. Certainly no stormwater features on site. Everything that pretty much hits the site flows to the back. Top right corner, northeast, that's Spring Brook. That's where all of the water goes. A big focus of what we wanted to do was be responsible with our development relative to the treatment of stormwater and take this as an opportunity to make improvements where none exist today. But beyond that, not much to see on the existing condition that you haven't already seen. Moving for the proposed site plan, again, this was covered, but a couple of things I just do want to point out. The first item relative to the siting of the building, based on some of the changes in the collaboration that we have, we did locate that centrally, and there really are a few points why that is very important and I think works to a much better project. The first, as you heard, is that full fire access all the way around the site. That was a very late add. We didn't have that early on, and frankly, I think it's a pretty good plan adding that in there now. So I'm very happy ownership was able to acquire the properties necessary to be able to make that change to do that. You'll notice also with the tracks to the rear of the site, by having that building centrally located and not pushed upon the tracks, that will provide a better residential experience, and it will make construction a lot better too, and not having any needs for easements and construction issues that could come up where we push in the limits for having that building pushed back. We do have larger buffering to the neighbors to the, or the development to the east, which that helps scalability. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me the most, and Now, Steve and his team did a great job of pushing that building back. You do see a lot of that articulation, particularly when you look at it from this angle along East Street. Even though the building, you'll notice right up, it might be 6, 7 feet from the property line where those corners hit, but they jog in, they jog out, and it just gives a great opportunity for put some public features along the front of the site. So from a driveway standpoint, you'll see that there's 4 driveways. There were 4 driveways existing, but they were just much larger and uncontrolled. Now they are controlled. The 2 perimeter driveways, left and right side, are 2 directional driveways, full access all the way around the site. And you can access the parking garage, which is in the back center of the building right there. And there's 2 driveways right in the front middle of the site. That's essentially a one-way in and one-way out. That serves those 12 parking stalls that are right in the front. The remainder of the lot has, I think, 100 surface stalls outside of the area, and some of those are compact. By compact, they're about 8 feet wide. We still kept the distance, but I'll put a little less pavement in there. And then within the garage, you heard there's about 59 parking stalls in there. There are EV charging stations that you heard based on the request of the fire department. Those are moved outside into the surface lot. They are on the, I'll call it the west side. You can see the 3 dots over there. So there's 6 stalls that we are constructing on day 1, and 12 will be essentially ready to add later once the demand hits. From a grading standpoint, very straightforward site for us in that the site's flat, so we really don't have to do a lot of excessive cuts and fills to make the site work. It's pretty easy for us to work with in that regard. So we're expecting a pretty straightforward grading scenario. What I did mention early on that we really focused on was the stormwater management. As you'll notice, we have a fully compliant stormwater management system with the site and the state standards. Series of modern system series of hooded deep sump catch basins with a couple water quality units, and then 4 infiltration systems that are scattered throughout the site. You can see those rectangles there to the right and then along the front. So that will provide not only treatment, but water recharge, which obviously hearing you in the prior presentations, I realize that's quite important to the town, as it should be. So that is stormwater management system. And then beyond that is just utilities. Utilities are, for the most part, pretty straightforward in that it's along East Street and there's utilities there. We will be connecting back into the utilities that are there. We've worked closely with the water department to talk about some of the connections to the water line. Our biggest challenge, honestly, is the sewer on site. When you scroll down, as was mentioned, you can see that yellow line. That is actually the existing town easement that bisects our property. It was originally right on the edge of the property before we acquired the 2 extra properties, and once that was acquired, it put it right smack in the middle of it. I have worked on properties where you do put the sewer line going underneath the building. That wasn't our first choice that we wanted to explore. So we're working with the engineering department and have come up with a situation where we're going to route the town sewer along the perimeter of the building under either side, provide easements to the town for that. There'll now be a new line as opposed to the old line that's in the middle, and connect back on the same spot. Still have some details that we'll need to work out on the final construction plans with the town, but we have initiated those conversations, and this plan did make some sense and seems very, very feasible when we reviewed it with engineering. Beyond that, you already saw the truck turning plan, so I won't go over that again, but we have used the town of Walpole fire truck apparatus, ran the truck turns, and everything fits in there well, and I believe they have great access to get in and out of the site from multiple directions as need be. So with that, I will turn it over to traffic and Mr. Jeff Dirk to go over that. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner with Vanessa and Associates, and we're the transportation consultants for the project. So we have prepared a detailed transportation impact assessment for the project, looking at all modes of transportation, so pedestrians, bicyclists and motor vehicles. The important part here, of course, and you can go to the next slide, Jeff, please. This is highly walkable, bikeable area, and as you heard from many of the presenters, the MBTA station is within a 5-minute walk of this site. There's also bus service along East Street and Main Street that travels to the MBTA station. So from the standpoint of multifamily residential, and really for an opportunity for us, there's no reason not to get people to use these alternative modes of transportation. So when we speak in a minute about what our recommendations are, you'll see probably one of the most important features of that is encouragement of these people to know we've got bus service going right by the site. We have the commuter rail station, so leave your car, walk to those, and don't really drive around. This slide here, what it does show, where you see the orange dash lines and the blue solid lines, that's the sidewalk infrastructure. So again, it really is speaking to embracing of a really walkable area for the project. And what you saw in some of the site planning parameters is connecting our project by way of walkways to get to the sidewalk out onto East Street to allow for that circulation to take place. The slide also shows the study area that we looked at. So probably, as you imagine, it's the triangular area bounded by East Street, Elm Street, and then Main Street. So that was the study area that we assessed as a part of the project, and 5 major intersections, all of the signals along Main Street within that area, and then we have the 2 unsignalized intersections along Elm Street. So we're looking at, again, all modes of transportation, pedestrians, bicycles, motor vehicles, and safety, and we're going to talk about safety in our recommendations as well. In terms of the increase in traffic we're predicting from the project, when we look at the census tract area where this project is located, what residents have reported is about 30% use an alternative mode of transportation. So meaning that they walk, bike, or primarily use public transportation to travel to or from work as their primary commuting mode. When we established the traffic characteristics of the project, we assumed it was going to be closer to 90% automobile trips, and about 10 to 15% we assumed would be an alternative mode of transportation. So we've overestimated on the vehicular side. The reason for that is we want to make sure as we look at impacts that we're assessing kind of the highest level impact, and then working with the town to develop improvements to address primarily existing conditions, but how the project impacts those existing conditions. Because as we look at the Main Street corridor and those signals during the peak periods, they really don't function very well. During the commuter peak hours, we do see backups primarily in the evening, and so we do have some recommendations in terms of what can be done to address some of those backups. Next slide, please. So as we're looking at a net increase of about 45 to 50 vehicle trips during the commuter peak hours, what we looked at in terms of impacts was not a significant impact, and one of the reasons for that is what's shown on the slide here, which we term dispersal. But once those vehicles leave the site, they're all on Elm Street. But once they travel on Elm Street, so about 45% are going to head towards, they're all on East Street. 45% of the vehicles are expected to head toward Elm Street, 55% toward Main Street. And that's what the existing traffic patterns look like out there during the peak period. So majority, it's pretty well balanced, but the majority is oriented toward Main Street. So if you picture that 45 to 50 vehicles coming out of the 4 driveways that you saw, some of it goes left to right, it shows up at either end on the East Street corridor, and then we have traffic turning left to right at those intersections. So you can see how the numbers get smaller and smaller once you get away from the project site. So the concentrated traffic is at either end of East Street, so at the Elm Street intersection, which is unsignalized, and then we have a traffic signal over at the Main Street intersection. But that 40 or 50 trips starts to get smaller as you get away from the project site. Next slide, Jeff. So as we're looking at the impact of the project and then providing recommendations first to address the access into the project site, we have a series of recommendations that deal with the driveway design, which is reflected in the site plans that John had just presented to you, just in terms of driveway width. Of course, making sure an emergency vehicle, which you saw on those templates, can get around the site. So we provide what the minimum dimensions are, and then John makes sure that those are incorporated into the site plan, and then running the fire truck around the site is to prove out those dimensions. Traffic control relating to stop signs, signs and markings within the site. The sidewalks and compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act, providing the wheelchair ramps. That's all about that connectivity. And then making sure we have safe sight lines at the driveways, making sure we don't have any signs or anything placed within the site triangle areas. So we have validated the fact that there aren't any objects located within those site triangle areas, so it can function safely. Lastly, the electric vehicle charging stations, which you've heard are on the plan. Next slide, Jeff, please. So that was on-site. Now we look at off-site recommendations. As I mentioned, there's 3 traffic signals along Main Street in this area. They are all interconnected and coordinated. So in theory, if you get through a green light on Main Street in one direction, you should continuously flow and get through that entire corridor there. That's in theory, and it doesn't work that way. So because of that, what we're going to be doing as a part of this project is developing an optimal traffic signal timing, phasing, and importantly, coordination plan. So making sure that those signals are operating in sequence so that you actually do get what's known as that green band. You should be able to start at one end of Main Street and progress to the other end and get through all of those green lights. The only interruption would be for a pedestrian, but then the signal should go back into coordination and you should establish that green band. So we will be doing that as a part of this project, is making sure they're synchronized, they're working together, and that you actually get through the traffic signals there. The Elm Street intersections, the unsignalized intersection at East Street and then at West Street, those are both high crash locations. So as we've undertaken our analysis, what we've shown is that the number of crashes that are happening in relation to the volume of traffic that's going through the intersection is disproportionate. We would expect there to be less crashes than there actually are occurring based on the volume of traffic going through those locations. So in order to address the crash situation that's happening, the first thing that's required is undertaking what's known as a road safety audit. You may have had those done elsewhere in the town, but really what that is the developer funds this, but it's getting police, fire, and planning, Mass DOT, out to those intersections to discuss what is happening in terms of the crashes. There's a lot of groundwork that goes into before the road safety audit is done with the police department, actually plotting the crashes on an aerial photograph so you can see where they're happening and indicating information as to what some of the potential causes of those crashes are. Everyone goes out to the intersection, discusses the information, notes are taken, that comes back, it gets published in the document with a series of recommendations to address the crashes that are happening there that the public officials provide comment on. They're ranked as short-term, low-cost. Those are really probably the most effective things, that they're things that you can go out there and do immediately. They don't require ripping up the pavement. They deal with retiming of traffic signals, signs, pavement markings, things like that. Really quick-hitting things that can be done and generally the most effective. There's intermediate term, kind of medium cost improvements. Those would be reconstructing some of the minor elements of the intersection. And then there's long-term high costs. Those are generally regional planning type of things. We'd look at putting in a roundabout or things like that, big picture items that would be done. Those are really like a state-funded type of improvement. So what we've done is we've committed to, the developer would be committed to providing the funds to conduct the road safety audit at both of those intersections. And then the outcome of that, which is the series of recommendations, they would design and construct those short-term improvements that are suggested as an outcome from the road safety audit at both of those intersections. So those are immediate improvements that can be done in the short term to address safety at those locations, and the developer would fund those. Next slide, Jeff. Lastly is the Transportation Demand Management Program. So again, these are the series of measures that will be done as a management measure within the project site, and this continues for the life of the project to really let the residents know about the opportunities for public transportation. So it's making sure we're providing them information, transit schedules and such, so that they know, what services are available and where are they located. Providing on-site amenities for telecommuting. I think that's some of what Jeff has talked about. That's really important in terms of the work from home. There is, we're actually seeing this from some, not our employees, but other employees who actually want to get out of their apartment or their home and have more interaction. Some of this telecommuting opportunities can be just providing a conference room or a place where people can kind of meet together and really get out of their apartment and do some work or interact with others. So that just kind of gives a break from being stuck in your apartment and working. Pedestrian accommodations we talked about, so linking the project to those. Central mail drop within the building. It sounds like a minor thing, but really providing those reduces trips to the post office, and that was what we're trying to do with that. And then lastly, secure bicycle parking. So we want both interior bicycle parking that's weather protected for the residents, and then exterior bicycle parking for any visitors that may show up. So that's important as well. I think that's the last slide I have, Jeff. So I thank you for your attention, and I'll be here to answer any questions you might have.
So that concludes our presentation for this evening. Would be happy to answer any questions. Also, slightly embarrassing, and I'm remiss, but I did not introduce this handsome gentleman to my left, who happens to be my partner on this project, and equally important, Justin Krebs from Strategic Land Ventures and co-applicant to SLV Silverstrand Walpole LLC. So with that said, if you have any questions, happy to answer, happy to defer to the technical team or go in any direction you'd like. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Board members, any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you for the refreshingly complete presentation. We appreciate it. I guess just two reactions or questions regarding the pedestrian connection from the site to the T. It looks like the plan is to cross the street and then use the sidewalk that's adjacent, sort of on the, I guess that's the south side of East Street at that location, rather than construct a sidewalk that continues along East Street on the same side of the street as your project. Is that correct? I'm just trying to figure out the pedestrian connection from the site to the actual T station.
That's the MBTA parcel that we abut to. Whether or not
So
they
if
can
I'm-
be engaged for those public.
Basically, the question is like, if I want to walk from there to the T, how do I get there?
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about and part of the mitigation that we've committed to is enhancement of the sidewalks along East Street. I think maybe it was confusing on our end, but one of the things that the town pushed us, and what we were calling the connection, was the walkway along the eastern portion of the parcel, because the town has designs on eventually developing the plaza. So there was thoughts about connectivity there, but the connection to the MBTA would be very much along the sidewalk on East Street.
I think the MBTA site, we don't have control of, nor does the town have control of. So the ability to continue on a sidewalk pattern, I think what you're asking is, are you forced to cross over to the side? And for that purpose, we don't control the MBTA site. It's a state process. We can't control that. As Jeff indicated, we provided dollars towards the improvements, which are likely driven along this location, and that's included in our development agreement. But to that point, the limiting factor and what we could not promise is that state, it's a process. They typically did not, from what we understood, also want a sidewalk along that from past discussions of the party to totally understand the town. So that's the limiting factor. So we're gonna do our best to endeavor to work with them if that changes, but that's not something we control. But we have committed to the sidewalk improvements as Jeff dictated per the development. So it will improve the pedestrian experience, but we may have to.
And they may be reluctant to do that in that we've heard that they're possibly redoing the T-stop, and so they're probably reluctant to give up any sort of space, but I imagine if they start engaging and start working on that T-stop, then we could engage them and further those discussions. It definitely benefits our tenants to have that, full walking, safe.
So I'm still not clear on the answer. Do you have to be on a sidewalk, do you have to cross East Street to?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And there is no crosswalk at that location?
They have to go down to Main Street and cross.
There's actually a slide in the transportation slide that shows all the sidewalks and stuff.
But the point is that to go to a crosswalk, there's, by a sidewalk, you'd have to go to Main Street. Is that what your question was?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just curious where that crossover across East Street is going to be.
Down.
If there's going to be a dedicated crosswalk, or if that's not something that.
The dedicated crosswalk is not something that's raised from our point on that, based on discussions with the DPW and consider changes to the sidewalk.
Yep.
So we've had that interface with them. I believe if you go, I was gonna say, down. If you went directly across.
This is the property
Right.
west of the site, immediately west of the site. That's the MBTA site. Jeff's gonna comment.
So the direct answer, there is no crosswalk. We'd have to add one. It would need to be probably at Greenwood. I think it's the closest place to do it. You don't want to do it mid-block, so we'd do a crossing there. It needs to be at an intersection. So that would probably make the most sense, is to do it there. The very first slide, Jeff. So that's probably the closest location we could do a crossing to the project site, other than, like you said, they either have to walk to Main Street or down to Elm Street. It's better just if we can get them across closer to where the site is located, it probably makes more sense.
So, right where the 27 is, that's where
Glenwood,
your
yes.
improvements would stop, on the upper portion. That's where the project improvements would stop, and then the T property is to the left of the 27. So you'd have to go across East Street to get to the sidewalk that's on that side of the street to get.
Yeah, and we wouldn't want a mid-block crossing, so it would need to happen at the intersection, and that would be, Glenwood would be the most sense to have the crossing happen there.
I think it's there.
Excuse me.
But there's no sidewalk
Right.
all the way down to Glenwood presently on the project side of the street.
Correct, there's not. I think we're building some along the project site frontage.
Well, we're contributing, I mean,
But we can only build on what we control, or what we,
Understood. Oh, yeah.
and that's our great limitation and the dialogue that's going on with the town. It's not an unwillingness to collaborate or work
No.
towards something, it's actually physical limitations on ownership and what we can assure.
Right.
And I think Jeff raised it, you have to go down to Glenwood to make the logical cross, I think, at that point.
So I was just gonna mention, so where the MBTA site is, are you indicating that the right-of-way isn't, there's not enough right-of-way there in terms of adding a sidewalk? I mean, adding a sidewalk? Or,
Our understanding is no. I
No,
mean, again,
okay,
We can
that's-
work with the town
Yep.
from you guys if you know something different, but our indications from the dialogue we had earlier.
no, that makes sense, I just, I think
That was
that
that was
you
the
can't put a
road.
sidewalk there, because
Yeah.
there's no
We'd
right-of-way.
love, we
Yeah.
would have loved to included our mitigation to include it down that line, but it's not something we can control, I think, under that piece is if we can endeavor to work with the town and the
Yep.
MBTA.
well, obviously, it's a point of interest to the board, so for the next hearing, let us do a better job capturing the existing condition, and we can share that, at the next presentation, and put our heads together and talk to the town and, do a better job communicating on what's out there now and what we may or may not be able to do.
Thank you.
Anything else, Bob?
I said one other, just high level. And again, I appreciate all the collaboration you've done, obviously, to this point, to put the project together and accommodate a lot of the comments from the town. So these are just one board member's question.
Helpful.
The second thing that struck me was whether the consideration had been given to, with regard to the parking that's located right at the front of the building, the little triangular section. I believe you said you started with like a parking ratio of 0.7 and now it's up to 1.2. Whether the consideration had been given to extend the pocket park kind of concept to have that be, rather than parking, sort of a courtyard or additional landscape space. Again, just a comment off.
The challenge of, I would say that on a realistic operational basis and for a couple of elements, one for new potential tenant visitation. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
no.
standing, just tag teaming
Sure.
with Jeff. But just on that, the primary entrance of the building being in this location, these spaces are trying to drive towards being handicapped, so you have proximity right towards the elevator, and it's also offering new tenancy, because obviously, if a new tenant, or when I say somebody coming in to visit the property to see it or to tour it, it doesn't make sense for them to park in the wave here. They need to be able to come in and out. So these are defined for that purpose, as well as a FedEx truck or otherwise to drive in. That's why it is limited to the spaces. We totally understand what you're looking on that intent, and that was some push and pull that evolved between these and how
Yeah.
this landed. But the reality is, this is a really beneficial element, I'll call it, from overall traffic conservation, I don't mean to speak on Jeff's end, but operationally also, handicapped access, tenant access, pop-in deliveries, drop-offs, and also if it was to be picked up from an Uber, this is a natural position.
Yeah, originally, some of that operational elements we had on East Street, which the town was not particularly fond of. So they were encouraging us to bring our guests and others onto the site, not park on East Street. So as Justin described, that area is for guests, drop-offs, really short-term parking, and the balance of the site under the building behind and to the east is really for residents.
That's all I have right now.
Thank you. Anybody else? Judy?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of things. Was there any consideration to making the entrances to the property one-way?
It's a good point, and I think I proposed it, and the town did not like it, and the fire department didn't like it. So both points, east and west, are two-way in and out. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but that was something we looked at one point, and the town encouraged us to do two ways in and out. The fire department did.
Okay.
Well, because it becomes the bandwidth and the distance between the two parking spaces and your ability to have drive lanes. If it's one way, they have the concern, and you typically on life safety have the concern that if a car were to stop there, two-way traffic allows a car to go around, even if it's in the opposite lane. It allows you accessibility. A single point of access with a single way tends to have impacts on life safety considerations. If somebody leaves a car, parks in the way, and it prevents the ability to circulate. So that's.
Okay, I'm very familiar with this stretch of road. I travel it probably a half a dozen times a day, at peak times and not peak times. And the queuing that takes place from the Main Street, East Street intersection towards the complex, it's pretty intense most of the day. Very infrequently do you see less than 5 or 6 cars, which would be kind of there, kind of at your entrance, heading east, I guess.
We feel that the two entries to the site do help with the queuing, that some people who are headed to the garage are gonna head to the further entry, and then anyone that's gonna head to the parking will head to that southern entry. But obviously, if stuff starts to queue up, they're gonna move on to that next entry. So we felt that left the site with as much flexibility as possible for getting the cars off of East Street safely.
Okay.
Traffic flows like water, right? If there's a blockage, then it goes the other direction, dual access. I mean, I think it might have been that guy back there, who's a smart traffic consultant who's talking that. But at the end of the day, that's the realistic way on why it works. And that's why having those 2 points of access actually, I think, will offset or be a benefit to them rather than in one direction. As Steve says, it allows multiple points of relief on the axis.
Okay, thank you. My second question was about the number of units that would be considered affordable of the total, and did you consider anything less than the 80% AMI?
We did not. They're priced at 70%, so you can earn up to 80, but it's a typical 40B, 25% of the total. So the window of eligibility is 70 to 80% of AMI. And we could tell you at the next hearing, I think it's in the book, what those affordable rents are at this point in time. Obviously, we're years out from when we would have anything, but, we can tell you what those rents are.
Okay. Well, I understand it's the standard, but did you not consider doing anything less than the 70 to 80%?
We consider everything, but the town was also interested in, a healthy mitigation payment from us. So I think they pushed us more in that direction than having lower affordability.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'd clarify one thing. I don't think there was a push. I don't think that they asked us to consider that specifically in the dialogue?
I was at the Zoom meeting when the presentation was made, and there was a question raised by someone in the audience. Would you consider anything less than the 80%? And the man on the screen, I don't see a face there, so I don't know if it was any of you, said that they would consider it.
I don't, I mean,
I didn't ask the
believe that may have been me, but I think we were pretty clear that at the point we were at 80%. I don't think we said to discuss it unless it was raised in the context by the gentleman who represented the housing board on this, but I don't remember or recall that to be the case. So
I was in the room, and I didn't ask because I sit here and I didn't want to taint a process, so that's why I'm asking now. So there was a comment made, we would look into it. So it
Well,
didn't
I mean,
get-
I think it's fair to say, not to be sarcastic, but there are lots of things that get considered, in the overall program that don't end up making their way into the program. So, so I think, we feel good about the application as it stands now. So, and in addition to the affordability, we're also, one of the amendments that we submitted is the development agreement we executed. We're also, as you guys know, writing a sizable check to the town of Walpole as well. So,
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I've got a few questions. First off, thank you for a very complete package. It makes our job so much easier and as enjoyable as it can be. The first question is, have you done other 40Bs and or developments comparable to this, and if so, where are they?
yes, we've done several. We have two actually pretty close to completion. One is 147 units in Winchester. That will be, we'll have certificate of occupancy in August. We have a 96-unit project in Winchester as well. That will be likely completed in October. We recently completed a 60-unit project in Situate called Sanctuary at Herring Brook. I would say the level of quality and finish there is comparable to what will be here. That was completed, Justin, 10 months, 12 months ago? So I would say those three projects are quite similar. And then Justin and I each have a long history, which I'm not going to bore you with, before we went into business together. I've been involved in, 5,000 units of housing in Massachusetts. Justin's done a lot of projects. The Kendrick in Needham, which is a 390-unit project, much bigger than what we're contemplating. But once again, a level of finish and quality, which is what we're contemplating here. So if you want to add to that.
The other thing too is, although it's not a 40B, we recently completed a project I did in Framingham called the Bancroft Lofts. It's a 258-unit project, historic renovation of 160 units, as well as another new 98 units. Sits right on Farm Pond. We're in the process, after that being a success, fully leased up. I see a lot of similarities of that asset to this asset. Had an impact on the downtown as far as bringing people to it, supporting the restaurants, the businesses, those elements. Also, we were surprised when we went back, and we're about to present in this coming week on parking and traffic counts, that the counts that we did, actually, now that the project's been completed, operating for a year and a half, were much less than the ITE requirements and what was done in the traffic studies. There was a lot more use of it, but what we found was people will work from home, and that shift COVID, have a lot more people working from home. It's some of why we're doing those community rooms, the work rooms, the Zoom rooms, but as part of that element, we also found, even though someone may not take the train every day, they may commute a day or two a week. The traffic counts seem less, but this type of asset has a really positive dynamic in a downtown environment, but also serving people if they need that accessibility to the train once a week, et cetera. It's been a very nice thing. So we stand by that. Again, we're back before them for almost another 300 units in that location. But I think that similarity between the downtown element, benefits that have been created, partnerships with what we created with local restaurants, et cetera, to do a lot of things. We have many events in the common areas that bring in local restaurants, local food providers, local artists who do training. So we really try to dive into the community. One thing I'll say about Jeff and I, and only on that for what it's worth, you know, we are the owners and principals. We will go get a larger investor to come in with us. They're institutional investors, often pension funds, well-known names out there that we can obviously provide you. So capitalizing is not a problem. We've capitalized about $350 million in development in the last 24 to 30 months. So as far as that ability to do it. But what's interesting is Jeff and I are involved. If anybody had an issue, one of you or a selectman or someone, they will call us. They can get in touch with us. We're not a large company. We're personal, and we have our hands in everything we do. So I just say that early on in the process. Hopefully, from the collaborative nature we've taken so far and what we'll continue on with them, that will resound. But we're also welcome, as Jeff said, to provide insight into any of those folks who've worked with it in the past.
Okay, thank you. So for the Winchester, the two developments in Winchester and the Situate one, were those 40Bs?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. My next question was, we've seen from the other large apartment buildings in town that there's a issue with delivery vehicles, and it's a real safety concern. How do you make it so that people will use your delivery location in the back, or at a minimum, pull into your front entryway there, as opposed to parking on East Street and running in?
So on that basis, just to define delivery, you don't mean a move-in. You
No.
actually mean like a UPS, FedEx, that type of delivery.
Yes.
That's really what drove that element that unfortunately took away the green space, but is that front entrance, because effectively that will be the parking for the UPS truck. Any of the larger trucks can come in, poke, stop, drop in. Where they would be dropping off the packages are immediately adjacent to that front entrance. So the natural thing they will do is pull into one of those spaces or pull off of that. That's to Jeff's point that he had commented on prior. We had more of a small cutoff right on East Street. There was a concern that there would be those types of impacts, so that led to that drop off, because that serves not only for Tennessee, but for all of the FedEx deliveries and otherwise.
This is testing my memory a bit, but correct me if I'm wrong, team, but one of the first iterations we had some jogs in the site for pull-off.
Right.
And the town did not like that, because we thought we were gonna kind of situate some of it on East Street, partially on it. So that's how this concept came to be. They wanted deliveries, they wanted guests off of East Street, they wanted to keep the street as clear as possible. I mean, we can do a little bit of a better job on future iterations of kind of, and with signage, what we can do is, we have some pretty robust signage packages at the other properties. We can show you kind of how we've used signage effectively to direct traffic in that area, but that's really what we're contemplating here. You know, short-term parking, delivery only, some, you know, guests here, that kind of stuff. So it's clear that it's not for residents, because we have plenty of parking elsewhere.
And for the oversized, we have the area at back that's for load-ins and has access to the elevator. But I think in addition to us providing the infrastructure and the signage, it comes down to the management company and their ability to communicate with, like, hey, you're our everyday FedEx guy, I can't have you in the street. You know, they really have to be vigilant when the building opens to start to say, hey, all the food drop-offs, you can't be queuing out there. We've got to have you come in and use one of these spots. So something that we've definitely looked at, and we think also needs that management component.
Right. Okay, so there's management, but then there's also making it so that it's easy for these deliveries. So
You hit upon it. The natural is, right, if you're a delivery person and you want to come right in the lobby to deliver to where they have, we don't have to direct somebody. The natural place is, I'm going to go to the closest location that I can pull in. So parking here is not effective. They're going to come in and park in any one of these spaces. because right there's the lobby. We are trying to, what your point is, to draw people to the natural path that would take them off the street. It's not logical, because there is no entrance along here, or it wouldn't make sense here to park. So you're gonna wanna park for deliveries, you're gonna wanna come in here for Uber pickups, all because that hub office and where a tenant or a guest would wait, the management office that would get the deliveries, the package storage, it's all driven here. And as Steve said, this is really designed because the access to bring in any move-ins is done on the backside of the building with the location to the connection to the elevators that go up at the back. So we're trying to keep it, let's just define it by how people naturally react to an environment without even the signage because of those proximities to those uses.
Okay. Thank you. Question on the trees. The picture that you show on the front of the application has some large trees along the entrance to like the Westbury property. But when I look at
So that's a good pickup. That's my renderer having a little bit of leeway with the design without the impact from without the input from the landscape architect. So you're correct. We're not calling for trees of that size, and I can make a note to get the rendering revised.
I guess the question is, I really think that, there's a lot of evidence that greenery in apartments, it's positive for the people that are going to live there. And I looked at what was actually being proposed when you were proposing the landscape plan. And is there any way to actually put in some larger trees along there or even along the train tracks? Only because, that's going to benefit the people that live there. So.
Let us take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, right, noted.
Yep. That's really what tonight's meeting should be. We can, talk about these. Next point, stormwater management plan. Where are you on the stormwater management plan?
So we had provided a stormwater management plan. We've sized the basins, we've done pre and post calculations. The one thing that we have not done, because we can't do it yet, is test pits. So we have some borings within the site, but where some of the basins are located, some of the buildings are, so we weren't able to do test pits, so we've made some assumptions based on borings, but I think the stormwater management package that we've put together is fairly detailed. I wouldn't call it 100% complete because we don't have the test pits, but we've made assumptions based on what we think the material is that we can verify afterwards.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And my final question really comes down to, one of the waivers that you're looking for is in the central business district, building height is 52 feet, and you're asking to go up to just under 70 feet, in fact, like inches below 70 feet. And I believe that's because the building code requirements change at 70 feet. So, this is going to be a large, tall building in the center of town. What can you do to mitigate it so that it somehow doesn't appear to be as tall? Or make it shorter?
No, we can't do that, but, I mean, it's a good point, and it's something that we've actually just begun talking about internally, and I think what you'll see in our renderings that we're going to advance allow us to come back with our renderings, because I think you're going to see some architectural details and some architectural fenestration and the like that's going to be designed specifically to address your issue in terms of how your eyes look at the building, breaking up the massing, reducing the visual impact and the like. So believe me, you're not the first person to raise that concern. but let us come back to you with a rendering that gives you, because what you see or what we've showed is really just one rendering, and that was done, I don't want to say we were scrambling to get this application submitted, but let's just say the town was encouraging us to get it in by the end of May, so we didn't quite, I mean, you know, as you can see, it's a robust package, but there were a couple things that we did not want to submit until we had more time to vet them. So for the next hearing, I think you'll see some better renderings and allow us to, you know, come back and let's talk about that, because I think we're going to be addressing it.
Okay. I see we have some people from the public. Do you want to comment, or do you have some questions or comments? Please come forward.
Excuse me, I'm very nervous, but my name is Linda Winslow, and I'm not a native of Walpole, but I've lived in town for over 50 years. My first concern is there are already 2 high-rise, and I know you gentlemen probably know that, and
Just
ladies.
talk to the board here.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Thank you for the presentation, and as the song goes, I can see clearly now. And in an already very congested downtown with a building the Bank of America is proposing on that site, that's already been given to a developer, and that's going to be the front of the bank. They're going to keep it the way it is, but then they're going to put an overbuild that's going to be 3 stories, and supposedly it's going to have underground parking.
No.
And then
Sorry, no.
Santander Bank is right next to the entrance to that development, or close to it, and that supposedly is going to be developed. And I know it might be hearsay what I'm hearing, but some of it's very definite, I think. And I think the first or the saddest thing I feel that lifelong residents of Walpole will not be able to enjoy the benefit of this development. They have to enter a lottery, and that is, you know, the way the state housing authority goes. And I think that's what I feel. I feel that as Walpole residents that need housing, because our housing in Walpole is critical, as it is in other towns, but the process that Walpole residents who are lifelong that should have priority, they can't get it. And that's my concern, and it's lovely, but it's too big for downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it gives me great pleasure. I'm sorry I did not catch your name, but to address the board. The board, as due course, can require a local preference for the affordable units, and we can work closely with Patrick and our affordable housing consultant to demonstrate a need to DHCD, who will approve local preference. So there very much can be local preference for people that live and work in Walpole for the affordable units. And obviously the market units are open occupancy. They're available to anybody. So I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, there's going to be a good amount of affordable units, and people working and living in town will have a very good opportunity to reside in those units.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Do you understand what he said? That
Yes.
as far as the market rate, anybody can, you know, they want anybody in those. And then the other ones, the zoning board can put a local preference, which I would expect we would do.
You would, but that is subject to approval by the subsidizing agency.
Okay.
I mean, that process he described is correct, but it's not something you really have a lot of control over. You would provide a narrative, you'd provide a narrative in support of it, and then, you know, it would have to be approved.
I would say this, it's, all due respect to the state, it's low-hanging fruit. I mean, Mr. Pucci, Councilor Pucci's correct. I mean, it's not a fait accompli as it once was, but if the town, and having worked with Walpole for the last 20 months, you guys have a lot of data, you know, at your fingertips that show that there is a need. So I have every confidence we working collaboratively with the planning department would be able to demonstrate that need to DHCD and that it would be incorporated in the eventual affirmative marking lottery plan. Yes, it's not guaranteed, but we've done a lot of these. My brother, who's the principal in SCB Housing, does more affirmative marketing and lottery plans than anyone in the state. He's done a couple projects in Walpole. I have every expectation that there'll be a local preference for this project.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying, you don't control it.
Okay, it's not controlled by the zoning
Yeah.
board. It's not a condition we can impose.
Right, I'm sure the applicant will work cooperatively with you, but Patrick's gonna come up with a compelling narrative, but you don't have the control over it.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
if I may.
Sure.
I might blend in with them, but I'm not to.
Oh, okay. I thought you were part of their large development.
Yeah. So, my name is Stephen Meltzer. I'm here on behalf of Liberty Station as both attorney and a principal. And I'll be brief. We're not opposed to this development. We think, first of all, the improvements that they've made since the original concept are significant. We do have one overriding concern, and it's based on our experience, and I'm going to share that a little bit with you, and that's parking. The parking ratio, 0.73, was terrible. 1.2 is still bad. As the project architect mentioned, Liberty Station's ratio is 1.39. We don't have enough parking for our residents, and as you probably know, as residents of the town of Walpole, parking is impossible down there. And if you speak to your public safety folks, you'll hear what problems we've had accommodating our residents and people who are the delivery trucks, et cetera, who are using our facility. At 1.39, we've had to increase that. We're getting lifts to put into our facility to increase the parking. We have from 100 Elm Street, we have rented additional spaces because it's not enough. Everybody who moves into these apartments who has more than, every person is going to want a car. And we just urge the board, and I'd bring it up now because it's something I think that they can fix. I think it's something that can be worked on either by reducing the number of units or by increasing the parking somehow, that their parking ratio needs to be much higher, needs to be much better, because it's a nightmare. It's a parking nightmare down there. For their residents, it's going to be difficult. It's difficult in our marketing efforts for our residents to keep that filled. It's a constant struggle, and it's a constant struggle with the town to make sure that our folks aren't parking in areas that are designated for the town. So I'd ask you and urge you, both you and the applicant, to bear that in mind and maybe think very, very hard about a 1.20 ratio. That is just not enough. And that's really all I have, other than to say that I do live about 1.5 miles from the Bancroft Lofts that he spoke of in Framingham, and it's a fantastic project. They did a great job, so.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate the commentary, and we're more than welcome to have that dialogue. I would want to make sure that we actually do apples to apples comparison. We are a 70% studio and one-bedroom environment. That's driven a parking ratio, to his point, just on the Bancroft Lofts. That is largely studios ones and only 20% twos. Similar to this, although we have the threes because of the 40B. We're only doing we have a 1-0 parking ratio at the Bancroft Loft, so we've done peak, it's about 258 spaces. And as long as those spaces, and this will be another element, it's both unit mix and whether they're reserved or unreserved. We initially at the Bancroft Loft started with reserved spaces. What we found was we never got more than 210 of the 258 occupied, but because it was reserved, it would impact visitors or other tenancy. On an unreserved basis, we've looked at it, we're converting to that basis, and I think on an unreserved basis, you'd actually find that utilization is there. Because not everybody parks 100% of the time in 100% of the spaces, but if you give them a space in a reserved basis, it impacts it. So we're more than open to the consideration. Obviously, we don't want to contribute to parking concerns in the area, but it should be based on really how many technically bedrooms per car, or what is the unit mix, as well as I said, whether that parking is reserved or unreserved. That I'm not sure if yours is reserved or unreserved, but that can have an impact. The comments were very kind, and obviously, we think the more multifamily we have, the better for the downtown. It benefits us all. You're very kind to comment on that, and we want to be respectful of you as a neighbor, so we'll definitely dig into that. But I would want to comment, we should really look at it very
Yeah,
specifically.
no, we will look specifically. We've got more time to talk about this, and parking is, we knew going into this, parking is going to be critical. Okay. Anybody else? I see Mr. Larry there. Good evening.
Evening, John O'Leary, Washington Street. I had a couple of questions through you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it was said that this was zoned industrial, is that correct? The entire property, or is it just part of it?
I believe it's industrial. Well, there is a two-family house on the property, but it's central. Central business.
It's all central, it's all central business.
My apologies.
So it is all central business?
Yes.
Okay, well, that takes away one of my questions, because as far as I know, industrial prohibits residential development.
It wouldn't matter for this project anyway.
Doesn't matter for 40B.
And
That's
you
okay.
basically asked my other question, the height of the building, so it's been addressed. So that's basically what I had questions
Yeah,
on.
it's up, we're going to continue discussion on that. so. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So what do we have for a continuation date for this?
July 25th?
26?
July 26th.
Okay. July 26th, back here, 7 o'clock. Is that good for
Mr. Chair.
everybody? What's that?
I'm sorry. Did you want to discuss peer review at all? Or?
Yeah, yes, peer review, your package is in good shape. We've used Tetra Tech in the past for peer review, we've been happy with them. What I'd like to do is get a scope, we'll do the same thing. We'll get a scope of what needs to, for peer review, and I think what we should be looking at for peer review is traffic, engineering, stormwater. Does anybody have anything else that they want peer review to look at?
Parking?
Parking, yeah. I mean, that's part of
That's right,
traffic and
oh.
engineering, yeah.
A
But,
little asterisk next to
We're
it.
fine with Tetra Tech, we know them well.
okay. So, thank you, Patrick, for that reminder. So what we'll do is we'll reach out to Tetra Tech. We've already reached out, they are available, and what we'll do is we'll get a scope of work, and we can let you know. What we might do is have Patrick reach out to you over the next month, and, you know, if you're agreeable, you can let him know that, yes, you authorize the payment for that, and we can get it started. We don't have to wait for the whole board to be here. Okay? But a scope of the work would be good. And it moves it along because we have a very thorough application. That's why I asked about the stormwater. We will need is, I guess you still have some holes to dig, soil profiles. Okay. Patrick, you good with that? You can move on that. Anybody else? Okay, so we'll continue this until July 26th at 7 PM here at Town Hall. Wait, I gotta make does somebody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Moved by Judy, second by Dave. Voting on this will be the regular members. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great night.
Thanks. Okay.
She's coming after Patrick.
Missing my
Can you do any more dates?
So one thing we had to do tonight on the agenda is vote
For the next meeting?
Vote to return.
Of course.
Oh, that's right.
I wrote on mine.
Refund. See you, George.
Thanks, George. I'll talk to you later. Okay, next we have the minutes from,
We do not.
no, we don't have the minutes.
I thought I was,
Sorry.
That'll be
I
next.
thought my Lyme's disease was going to my brain. We don't have them, okay.
What we do have is the Burns Ave peer review refund vote. Patrick, how much is left? Do you know?
Find it. I think it's around.
7930.
Thank you, Mark.
How much?
7930 out of around 9,000.
Yeah, 10,360 was collected and used 24.
Yep,
Last
so
page.
the initial provided amount was 10,360. The amount remaining is 7,390. So I think this is just per the typical process. In order for the applicant to get the refund, the board needs to take a vote to release the refund, or release the remaining amount.
Okay.
So that project actually was not appealed. It's through the process. This is Burns Ave, so it's all concluded.
Does he want
Okay.
to roll it into the next one?
Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the return of $7,930 for peer review to Wall Street Development Corporation?
So moved.
Moved by Bob,
Second.
second by Mark. Any further discussion on returning those funds? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And voting on that would be the five regular members, the four regular members and Mark, and Judy abstained. You stepped down. Okay. Okay, anybody have anything else for the board?
The one thing I added to the package was a kind of a draft of our meeting schedule and itinerary. So obviously, we had 3 cases tonight from 40B related. We have 2 others that are scheduled on July 17th, the modification to 55 Summer Street and Moose Hill. I'm not sorry, keep doing that, the Ponset Village. And so just trying to take a look at our time and thinking of how to try to set up each meeting. Kind of put a rundown of mostly just looking at future meeting schedule dates and then kind of an overview of what the meeting focus should be. And obviously the conclusion of the public hearing, at least the initial 180-day date is included at the kind of the end of all these. So I think the thought was obviously, especially the ones that are new, is having an opening, discussing peer review, procuring peer review, and then kind of going over specific areas of site development in terms of site layout, access, traffic, infrastructure, additional engineering concerns. Obviously, Darwin, and for example, that's a unique location next to the aquifer, so that's going to probably require additional thought and work going into mitigating stormwater there. And then that just concludes, obviously, with a finalization discussion of waivers, the decision discussion, close the public hearing. So everything is really just kind of tentative, and obviously, this is a best case or kind of a consistent case scenario. Obviously, these cases all change depending on what we get and how they flow. So this is just to kind of hopefully give an idea of how we want to treat each meeting. So to speak.
I think this is a great roadmap moving forward, but I'd want to take time to go through this and.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
No,
this
of
is,
course.
this is.
That's why I put that big draft right there.
No, that's good. That's great. So, okay. Yeah, that will help us stay focused.
Yep.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot, obviously, over the next, I know this board's, since I got here, it's been buried in 40Bs, and somehow they came back again, so should be interesting.
Yeah. Okay, anybody have anything else? Okay, very good, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Judy,
Second.
second by Mark, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, so carried. Good night, everybody.